Do you want to know how good is the Ice Age in U10? Spoiler alert, it's going to be really good. Then I'll tell you. Hello, welcome to another JMP video. I'm the host JonNario, and today I'll be teaching you how good is the Ice Age in U10. But as always, I'm just going to mention everyone out there that this is just pre-recorded before actually moving on into my, into moving from Puerto Rico. So if you want more information, check out the YouTube community tab, check out on my Discord server, or also check on my Paracating video, which there should be a lot of information and all of that. So that is going to be everything in those respective platforms. Now let's move on into the actual video. The Ice Age currently is going to be one of the most popular characters in the entire game. Probably currently the most popular, obviously, in Delves. But being one of the most popular characters, similar to the last week's episode, probably I should hope that last week is going to be like the Shadowhunter video. I will trigger a lot of people. I know for a fact, because a lot of people actually can give a lot of different opinions on a certain character. But at least on the Ice Age, a lot of people should agree that this character is pretty ridiculous right now, unlike the Shadowhunter, which is kind of controversial. But with the Ice Age, it is popular and it is strong. But I know for a fact that if I say something that is, some people might not agree with me, people might try to convince me otherwise. That's just how it is. That's just the internet in a nutshell. Anyways, let's move on. Now, let's start talking about the stats. Here are my stats. Pause the video if you want. Here's my gear. Just go ahead and see. Here I do have attack speed and movement speed, all pieces of gear. I do have a magifying ring instead of energy regeneration, but it's whatever. The reason I use attack speed and movement speed on this character is that this character I actually did use it for Delves with max critical damage and max attack speed, but I decided to change into movement speed and just go with attack speed before because of this series. And I actually just use the Ice Age a lot in lower delving. I will probably say mid delving, and so I don't need the critical damage, so I just go with movement speed so I can move around from pretty much from room to room much quickly. But yeah, I just have to say that my equipment is just going to be the standard movement speed equipment with the ally buff, the banner that grants the movement speed, the max movement speed equipment that is trailblazing arcane, nice subclass because of flash, and yada yada yada. Normally I don't use this setup for Delves. I actually do use Datafine and I do use Chronomatic Emblem, but for U10 I much rather just use Trailblazing Emblem because it's a lot better than just using Chronomatic Emblem. It is much more effective because of the extra movement speed. But yeah, that is going to be pretty much everything regarding my gear. Now let's move on into my gems. My gems are going to be as follow. I do not have the max movement speed, equipment. I only have Paradise, if I do recall correctly. Class gem. I do have volatile velocity, which does help out greatly in Delves for solo delving. And obviously I do have a Survivor because of the extra light. Obviously, if you're using the character for U10, make sure to have Vampire Vanquisher, Paradise, and Class Gem on this class like any other class in the entire game. But with this character, you can use it as a pocket main, so just have your main dungeon grinding character and just have the Ice Age for delving. So using this setup for delving is going to be much more ideal for the character because you can actually just use the Ice Age and for delving, and then you can use something else for dungeon grind. But either way, if you want to use this character for dungeon grinding, obviously Vampire Vanquisher, Paradise, Class Gem, and anything else up to you. And that's going to be everything. You can just see all of that, including my gem rolls. And now let's move on to my first opinions on the character. So obviously the character is extremely popular, like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, but the character is also very very solid for dungeon grinding. Like I just mentioned before in my Revenant video, this might be the best overall character in the entire game. What I mean by overall is from 0 to max. Character that you can just start off with the game and just get it to maximum, and that's going to be the character that it will just do well at any portion of the game. That is going to be an overall character for 0 to max and for any type of content. That is going to be Leviathan, that is going to be Delves, and that is going to be dungeon grinding. I do feel that the Ice Age has pretty much is just among the tops in every single category except dungeon grinding, but either way, like in dungeon grinding, it's still very very good. So yeah, this is a character that in my opinion might be the best all-around character in the entire game. If you want to use it, then go ahead and use it, but if you don't like it, don't build your character for the Ice Age because I said this. Because I swear I said something like this and people just go like, oh yes, I need to just immediately go ahead and just build this character. It's like, no, don't do that. Just build the character if you feel that you enjoy the character a whole lot. Enjoyment over efficiency, that's all I gotta say. So yeah, that is going to be pretty much my first opinion of the character. Now let's move on into the ability, starting off with the basic attack. The basic attack of the Ice Age does a 2.75 times damage multiplier, which is pretty high up there. It's one of the highest damage multipliers in the entire game. It is the same damage multiplier as something like Paradise, and it is slightly higher than the Knight and Shadowhunter no Class Gem. It is unique to the Ice Age. It does have have a base attacks per second of 1.5 attacks per second, which is the same as the Dino Tamer, which is average. I wouldn't say it's fast, but it's not slow. It does have a range of around 27 block range, which it is standard for range type characters, and it is going to be single target, if you're not counting the class gen, obviously, which I'll get more into that in a little bit. But it also does apply the cold-hearted passive ability, which does lower your movement speed. Well, it does lower the movement speed on enemies that you hit them with basic attack. Same goes with Ice Crash, but I'll get more of that in a little bit. And it also applies a freeze if you do have the class gem ability with the first basic attack. Either way, that is going to be pretty much everything regarding this basic. It's a pretty solid basic attack. One of the things that I will be mentioning is that, like the Fate Trickster, this is one of the few basic attacks that actually doesn't lower your movement speed whatsoever. So you can actually hold down the basic attack on the Ice Age and you will not lose any movement speed. So there's not point in not holding out the basic attack if you see an enemy from really far away. But keep in mind, if you want the movement speed buff from allies, you need to be between 15 blocks in distance, so you don't miss out on the buffs. And seeing that this basic attack can one shot at max stat, you can actually just miss out on that movement speed buff, so be on the lookout on that one. Now let's start talking about the passive ability Cold-Hearted. So what it does, the Cold-Hearted is going to be the basic attack and Ice Crash shields enemy, applying them a snare effect for 5 seconds and 3.5 seconds respectively, which is going to be 3.5 seconds for Ice Crash, 5 seconds for the basic attack, if you want to look at it that way. And yeah, it will allow you to just cross Ice Block without sliding, but when it comes to U10, that only applies if the enemy has the freeze ability on the ground, which is not that big of a deal to begin with. But yeah, that is going to be pretty much everything. The snare, it actually lowers the movement speed on the enemy by 50%, so enemies will walk at half the speed, and that's pretty much what it does. If you hit an enemy with either basic attack, it will apply that snare, allowing them to move 50% slower for 5 seconds. If you hit them with Ice Crash, it will be 3.5 seconds, so 3.5 seconds. And that's pretty much everything regarding the Cold-Hearted. Now, let's move on into the Paint Freeze, which is the class gem ability, which is an addition to the actual passive ability. So, in addition to all of the effects that you actually do get from the Cold-Hearted passive ability, the first hit that you hit with your basic attack, it actually apply a freeze to the enemy. So freezing the enemy for 1 second, so it is 1 second of full stun. So similar to like the Night Spirit Squire, is going to just hit them and just going to make them freeze for 1 second, and that's just going to be how the passive ability work out with the classic. Also, if you do hit the same enemies 3 times with your basic, there's no cooldown, by the way. If you hit the enemy 3 times with the basic, it doesn't matter if, as long as you hit that same enemy 3 times, it's going to cause an explosion, dealing 6.3 times damage multiplier to all enemies around it, which is the same damage multiplier as Ice Crash, by the way, just as a little spoiler alert. But yeah, it does not have a cooldown, so if you hit 3 enemies at the same time with 1 basic attack, you have to hit all 3 enemies 3 times each. It's not going to be 1 enemy then it's going to trigger the explosion. It's not going to be 3 basic attacks. It's going to be 3 hits per enemy. So if you want the explosion for all of those 3 enemies, you have to hit the 3 enemies 3 times. But if you do hit the enemies 3 times at the same time, each and every single enemy, it will cause an explosion. That is why the Ice Age is the best solo delving character, because if you pull a lot of enemies at the same time, you're going to hit multiple enemies with the small AoE from basic attack, and it will cause an insane burst damage explosion, exploding pretty much, you could instantly just say like a 7 or 8 explosion at the same time. You can actually just see that, and it will just freeze the game and it will just cause a massive knockback explosion. It's just ridiculous. But yeah, that's because of the actual class gem ability. And yeah, that's going to be pretty much how it is. That's going to be how the class gem ability works. And yeah, it is solid. It is extremely solid for not only for U10, because it allows you to just go with just pure basic attack for bosses, and then just use Ice Crash for like Curse Skulls if you want. And yeah, it is a really strong ability. It is really strong, and probably the reason why the character is so good at solo delving and in general, like it has really good DPS because of this. And so yeah, that is pretty much everything regarding the class gen. Now let's move on into Ice Crash, your main damaging ability for the most part if you do have enough stats. So this is a character that you can either use with pure basic attack, or you can actually just use Ice Crash for more crowd control. The Ice Crash on crowd control is going to be better for Curse Skulls, and the Pain Freeze or the basic attack is going to be better for bosses. Similar to like, let's just say the Fate Trickster, this is extremely similar. Now the Fate Trickster, you can throw Glitter Bomb for Curse Skulls, basic attack for enemies. This is exactly the same thing. You can just use Ice Crash for Curse Skull, basic attack against bosses and against regular enemies, and it's going to be a lot better for the character because this is a really strong ability. Like, don't get me wrong, this is a really solid ability, but you're not going to use it if you want high DPS. Now, this is a pretty decent damaging ability which has a really good crowd control, and not only that, really short cooldown and extremely small energy cost. So it does 6.3 times damage multiplier. It has a range of around 6 blocks in distance if you throw down, like, because you can hold it down and you can throw down the Ice Crash. It has a 7 by 7 block radius, which is really good. It has a 0.5 second cooldown, so you can throw 2 of them per second with a really short animation time, and it only costs 15 energy per cast. Considering that the Ice Age actually does get energy regeneration on level up, this is actually really good because you can actually just spam Ice Crash without energy regeneration equipment, and it's not going to hurt the Ice Age a whole lot. This Ice Crash ability is extremely solid, really good. So I would recommend you to use this for Curse Skull. So it does pretty hefty AoE, pretty good damage because it can one-shot even regular enemies without the martial even at mid-game. Like, it is strong. It is a strong ability. So pick what you choose. It's literally, you could argue being either this one or Glitter Bomb being better, but pretty much for me those two are pretty much equal because Glitter Bomb you can spam it more quickly but costs much more energy and does less damage, but it can stun. With Ice Crash it lowers the enemy movement speed, it costs a lot less energy but it does have a cooldown and it does more damage. But yeah, so you can argue being the two in equal in turns. So if you do like the Fate Trickster, pretty much this is going to work out almost exactly the same. So yeah, that is going to be pretty much everything regarding the Ice Crash. Now let's move on into the Big Chill. The Big Chill is your freeze type ability. This is a pretty good AoE type ability that actually does help out with survivability, because what it does is actually when you press the ability it will freeze all enemies in a 7 block radius around you. So it is going to be really good. It's going to be the same AoE as Ice Crash, by the way. It will freeze all enemies by 3.5 seconds and the AoE will do 3 times damage multiplier. So it will do an instant 3 times damage multiplier to all enemies around you, so you can actually just use this to kill all enemies one shot, which is very nice. And not only that, it will just add a damage over time effect for 3.5 seconds, doing 0.66 times damage multiplier per half a second. I do believe it's going to be per half a second per second. I don't remember. Future me obviously is going to have everything on screen. It has a 7-second cooldown and it costs 40 energy. Considering that pretty much like I just mentioned before, Ice Age does have an energy regeneration on level up, this is not that big of a deal because you can actually just use this and you just have a 7-second cooldown. If you do have the Chronomatic Emblem, you can technically just spam this because the Chronomatic Emblem, when you use a flash, it will reduce all of the cooldown by 7 seconds. So you can actually just press the Big Chill, use a flash, and then you just press the Big Chill all over again. This is actually pretty nice if you want to just help you out with survivability. This is a really good tip for delving, by the way. But this is not a delve, this is U10. Either way, a pretty solid ability. Good in terms of survivability, you can just use it and you will freeze enemy for 3.5 seconds. Like 3.5 seconds stun is just ridiculous. And in between those 3.5 seconds, you should kill at least anything in the entire game. If you're not killing anything in this U10, but in 3.5 seconds, then your character is a little bit weak. I'm sorry to say that. But pretty much this, you can just use it against bosses. You're guaranteed to kill that boss. So in terms of survivability, this is really good. And so yeah, that is pretty much everything regarding the Big Chill. And now let's move on into the pretty broken, overpowered ultimate ability, Frozen Ward. So Frozen Ward, what it does is when you press the ability, you're going to gain a shield. That shield is going to grant you a lot of stats and also is going to protect you for 50% of your HP. One of the things that actually got on one of the hotfix, I do believe it was after Into the Deep was introduced, they actually buffed the subclass on the Ice Age, which is technically this Frozen Ward, which instead of actually just taking 1 hit and the shield breaking, it actually takes 3 hits. They actually did not mentioned that, but it actually translated the same into the Frozen Ward ability. So right here it will take 3 hits before the shield actually just breaks. So just keep that in mind. If you read everywhere else, it will say just 1 hit and it will break after if you take more than 50%. That's not the case. It actually just takes 3 hits. So it is very, very good. Now, there are also other things that you're going to get is going to be as follows. You're going to get 5 times your attack speed, which is the same buff that you do get with Shadowhunter. So with the Shadowhunter costume, which is just insane, it pretty much translates that you will be shooting at max attack speed. You will get 100% and magic damage. That is going to be total magic damage. This is not bonus magic damage. This is total. This is actually take your total magic damage that you see in your character sheet, multiply it by 2. It is the strongest damage buff that you are going to get in the entire game. It is the same damage buff that you do get with Martial and Arcane Emblem, which is going to be based on your total damage. It's not like, let's just say, the Revenant passive, the Vanguardian fired up ability, which those increase your bonus percentage damage, which is just going to be the same as Mastery, Allies, and all that good stuff. This is actually an increment to your total damage, so it takes your base damage and your bonus percentage damage into account and just multiply by 2. That's pretty much how it is. It's just ridiculous. It is a stupid strong ability in terms of damage output, and it also increases your movement speed by 50, even more ridiculous. And to top it all off, this is one of the shortest cooldown ability in the entire game, on a 30-second cooldown, and it will last for 5 seconds. And yeah, it is a really strong ability. Let's just say for dungeon grinding, if you do have enough stats, you can actually just use that as your movement speed type ability, because it's 50 more movement speed. That's more than the Dino Tamer's ultimate ability, which is a plus 40 on the Dino Tamer. This is a plus 50, even though it's only 5 seconds, but you can actually just use that to move from dungeon to dungeon really quickly. Like I'm just doing it a couple of times during this video. In the footage in the background, you're going to see me just using the Frozen Ward just to move from dungeon to dungeon, because I already killed fast enough without the ultimate ability active. But if you're on the newer player, if you're in terms of lower power range, you cannot kill rather quickly, then just use it as your damaging type ability. But for me, that I'm maxed out, like pretty much 100% in all terms of stats, I don't need it, so I just go ahead, just use it for movement speed purposes. This ability is really strong. I will say it is a really strong, solid ability that honestly I will strongly recommend you to just use it on cooldown as soon as you see either a boss, or just if you have high enough stat, then just use it on cooldown just to move from dungeon to dungeon. And yeah, that is going to be pretty much everything regarding all of the abilities. Now into my end opinions on the character. So this is a character that just works in any portion of the game, similar to Revenant, similar to Tomb Raider. These are overall characters that are just good at any portion of the game. But you're going to see the better notice in dungeon grinding with the Ice Age around mid-game. So mid-game, Ice Age is going to be where it truly shines, because the DPS is rather high, and not only the DPS is rather high, the Ice Crash is going to dish out pretty hefty damage against regular enemies, which you can just use that towards your advantage in killing Cursed Skull much quickly. One thing that I didn't mention throughout this whole video, it is going to be, as I think that you might notice a couple of times during this recording, and it's going to be sometimes if you do use certain abilities, the Ice Age just gets stuck in animation, so you had to press the button all over again. It is somewhat of an inconvenience, but it did happen multiple times. So if you're using, let's just say you're using the basic attack, and if you want to throw Ice Crash, sometimes it doesn't even activate Ice Crash. You're just stuck just looking at the enemy, and then you have to press the ability again, or either basic attack. So the character does get stuck around multiple times often. Maybe it was because I was lagging during this recording, but I don't think so. It did happen multiple times in Delves as well. So keep that in mind. So if you see that you're pressing the button and the Ice Age is not doing anything, keep pressing the button all over again, and you're going to get that fix. Either way, the Ice Age is just, in my opinion, the best overall character in the entire game. The reason being, like I just mentioned, good crowd control, good DPS, it has good survivability, it is a character that scales off really quickly, it has a really strong ability, a really good classroom. It just has everything, and it's saying that it is a range high DPS type character. You can actually just use it for delving, because it can dish out pretty hefty DPS against bosses. You can use it on Leviathans, you can use it on dungeon grinding, you can use it anywhere. And yeah, honestly, that is going to be pretty much everything regarding the Ice Age. Mid-game Ice Age is where it's at. That is going to be everything for me for today. Be on the lookout for next week, which I'll try to cover on the Lunar Lancer. So be on the lookout on that one. So thank you everyone for watching. Thank you for sticking around as always. Leave a like if you want to help the channel grow. Subscribe if you want to see more content like this. And that is all for today. Once again, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Take care and keep on hunting.